Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. This episode is brought to you by Workforce Alchemy, helping leaders improve hiring, engagement, and retention while uncovering people-related profit leaks hidden in everyday operations. Today's guest, Bill Cates, helps business leaders grow in a world where attention is cheap, trust is scarce, and relationships still win. He is the author of the book Radical Relevance. It's a book that challenges leaders to stop chasing visibility and start earning trust by becoming genuinely useful, referable, and indispensable to the people they serve. This conversation is about the specific actions, behaviors, and strategies leaders can use to increase relevance, generate better referrals, and build growth that does not depend on constant promotion or pressure. Bill, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, and just so make sure people heard correctly. It's not Bill Gates. Yeah, I know. I missed it by one letter and a few bucks. But what I like to say is, Bill Gates may have a lot of money. I'm going to help you make a little more, just in the spirit of service to others.
Well, I'm a fan to have Bill Cates on the program, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you set aside time. Thank you. So why is it important now more than ever to be radically relevant? And what are some of the most important rules?
Yeah. So the main thing is, and really the subtitle of the book says it all. It's sharpen your marketing message, cut through the noise, win more ideal clients. So it's marketing message overload. Everybody knows it. The internet and social media and all the various tools and apps out there has made it easier to get our message out, but harder to get our message through. And so the solution is radical relevance, hyper relevance, which essentially means being so focused on who you're trying to reach. The who is so important. Who are you trying to reach? And from there, usually the rest of it follows, meaning how you talk about your value, how you get to know those people and talk about them and the questions you ask. All of that becomes more real and relevant to them because you know who they are. Simon Sinek popularized the why. Start with why. Well, the why is important. We need to know why we do what we do. We need to believe in our why and our value. And we want to know our clients' why and what motivates them as well. And quite often the who part is neglected a little bit. And when you know the who, everything kind of starts to fall into place on how you talk about your value. And then you can grab someone's attention. If you think about, I travel a lot, so I going through an airport, man, I am barraged by messages. Right it's on the floor, it's on the ceiling, it's on the walls, it's in the PA system, it's everywhere, and the brain doesn't like that. The brain shuts down. The brain ignores all that stuff unless it hears or sees something relevant. Once it sees something that's relevant to me, that's a fear I have, that's an aspiration I have, then it will pay attention. And so what we need to do is be able to message our value in such a way that will catch that attention. And then we've kind of earned a few seconds of their time. And then continuing how we catch their attention, we earn a little bit more time and maybe eventually get to have a good conversation and do business with them.
That's so true, because I think a lot of businesses are missing it when they sit in there and they're thinking, I'm just competing against XYZ competitor, ABC competitor. No, they're not. They're competing with everybody who's trying to get the attention of their prospects
Yes.
or
Yes.
customers.
Yes.
And it is overwhelming. And I am guilty. I admit that I'm guilty of going through an airport or looking at emails or watching television or anything. And I actively filter for what doesn't relate to me. What don't I need? What can I ignore? I literally will scan an email and say, can I ignore this? Is this relevant and important to me? So your topic of radical relevance is of significant interest to me, which is why I invited you on. So what are some of the rules of radical relevance? Not just being relevant, but you have to be radical to cut through all that stuff. What are some of the rules?
Yeah. So in the book, I outlined 17 rules, actually. I'll give you a few. One rule, the first one is the way to become relevant to someone you don't know, or I should say the shortest line, the fastest line, straightest line to creating relevance, interest, attention of someone you don't know is through the introduction from someone they know and like and trust. And that's why forever I've focused on referrals. I've got several books out on referrals and client acquisition. And this was a kind of a natural extension of that, because once you start getting introduced to people and trying to meet people and be more proactive, if you don't have a relevant message, they're not going to pay attention. Okay, well, how to be relevant? Get introduced. Right. So that's the number one rule. I'll give you a couple more. One is only differences that matter. And what I mean by that is, so many people say, What makes you different? What makes you unique?" You got to know that. Well, I agree to an extent that that can be important. That is sometimes how you grab their attention, but only if the difference matters to those people. So when you become so absorbed with the who you're trying to reach, the persona, the avatar of exactly who you're trying to reach, then you can start to come up with differences that make a big difference for them. So when you're talking about your difference, make sure they're not platitudes. Let me tell you what doesn't make you different, all right? It's all the platitudes. We care about our clients. We get to know our clients. We provide customized solutions. We deliver responsive service. And I'm not saying we don't talk about those things. All those things are important to talk about, but they're not differentiators. A good differentiator might be the fact that you focus on them and their industry or the characteristics, demographics, psychographics of who they are. That could be a big difference. It could be a certain kind of expertise that you bring that someone else or very few people bring. So that's one of the rules. And then the last one, real quick, is give your clients or customers a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is really two things. First of all, as you're thinking about your value, talking about their value, talking internally with your team, pretend you have a prospect or a client sitting there at that table with you. Are they going to appreciate the way you're talking? Are they going to understand what you're talking about? Are you treating them more like chattel rather than really real humans and people, right? So that's one part of giving them a seat at the table. And the other part is, generally speaking, when you're developing your marketing message, don't do this in a vacuum. One of the exercises I do with my clients is have them do some of the work we do and then go to some of their clients, some of their key clients or even prospects in some cases, and say, "Hey, here's how I'm talking about my value. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. Here's what I think makes us a little different," and gleaning feedback from those people. Sometimes you're not quite sure what makes you different, so ask your clients. Can I give you two quick examples? Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, let's make it real. And this is what I deal on the level of strategies and tactics. So let's get tactical for a second. All right. So I was doing this exercise with one of my clients, Michael Schmitz, out in San Mateo, California. He's since retired. But I asked him, I said, "Tell me, in your eyes, what makes me a little different? Or if you were to talk about me to someone else, what would you say?" Which, by the way, is a great way to kind of foreshadow the referral process. And he said, "Oh, I just tell people that Bill Gates makes asking for referrals as natural as breathing." And I go, "Well, that's pretty good. I never would have thought of that. Can I quote you?" And he says, "Yeah, of course." So now, if I said I make asking for referrals as natural as breathing, that would be marketing hype, right? It's clever, kind of cool, might attract attention. But if I say Michael Schmidt says, now I'm not bragging, I'm just quoting and adding some social proof in with that at the same time. So I was coaching a couple of financial advisors on the West Coast, Daniel and gosh, I forget the other guy's name for all of us, Daniel and Brad. And so they went to a client doing this exercise and they said, "What do you tell folks about what we do? Or how would you describe?" I said, "Oh, I call you guys my dream makers." And they go, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, not only have you helped me create a financial plan and you've learned what my dreams and goals are, you're helping me fund those dreams. You've helped me realize that there's nothing worse than an unfunded dream. And so you're helping me actually accomplish those things. You don't just know about them, you're helping me get there. So I call you my dream makers." And they looked at each other and go, "That's it." Right. So give your clients a seat at the table in terms of figuring all this out. And you'll be amazed at some of the things that they tell you that you wouldn't even think of.
I want to make sure the people in the audience that are watching or listening are getting what you just said because you made it sound so smooth and there was some magic in there. Love that a friend of mine, he's a consultant in Washington, Missouri. His name's Hank Epstein. And he always talks about how humans are meaning making.
Meaning making machines. Yes,
Yes.
I know the expression.
And it's like, what does this mean to me? And when you start talking about radical relevance, I think about a typical marketing campaign like, oh, we can do this for your company. And it's going to sound like the Peanuts, the teacher on the old
Wah, wah.
Peanuts, wah, wah, wah. Exactly right. It's just like the same old stuff. Oh, we're going to help you
Right.
save profit. We're going to help you increase sales. We're going to help you cut costs.
Platitudes.
Yes.
Platitudes.
And while those may be true, they're easy to ignore. Like I've heard that before. It's not radical. And the meaning making person who's hearing that is like, well, what does that mean to me? Well,
Exactly.
yeah, the boss might make more money, the company might make more money, but if this means I'm going to have to work extra hours, or if this means I'm going to have to work late or get up early or miss my kid's little league game, not only am I not interested in that, like I want to avoid that stuff being there. What's in it for me? I totally get that.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
That's an area that most business owners, salespeople, anyone involved in business development misses. So what you're talking about there is some of the benefits of what we do, which is important to talk about benefits. We can save you money, help you make more money, save time, all of that. That's good. And then there's the next step, which a lot of people don't realize, and that's the benefit of the benefit. How do we make that benefit that we claim to deliver, that and maybe I'm talking to you through a Zoom and I'm saying, here's a benefit. Now I want to say, how would that show up for you? Or what would that look like for you? Or what does that mean to you? I want you to try on the benefit. I want you to make that benefit I just talked about that I claim to do. I want you to make it relevant to you. And then you start to own the benefit. That's another form of the tactical side of radical relevance is make sure you talk about the benefit of the benefit. And that can only be interpreted by the receiver of the message. And that's a form of tactical radical relevance.
When the key word that I heard from you, my ears perked up when you start talking about who, like admit for a while I was making a mistake and going on assumptions that should have been questioned and tested earlier.
Yes.
For example, I'll just be open. My core business, I provide, if I were going to sound salesy and template, I would say we provide skill, attitude, and personality-based assessment tools to help companies avoid hiring disasters, engage their employees, and retain them. And that sounds like wah, 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 wah. Even though those are benefits that could be perceived as positive by business owners, by sales executives, by human resource directors, that's not radically relevant. If I were to go to a business owner and say, hey, I can help you reduce turnover, or I can help you increase sales, or I can help you reduce your labor costs by getting people who I have a work ethic, reliable, skilled, whatever, using pre-employment testing. Those benefits would sound okay to a business owner. Some of them are going to jump on that and they're going to say, well, hey, talk to my HR. And HR looks at it and says, oh, that's extra work for me. And so that's a different meaning making thing. And
Yeah.
they're happy to do it and they're good at it, but it's just another thing on their plate. And if the company sees all those improvements, typically that's not going to mean extra rewards for them. They're not going to see any of that extra savings in their paycheck, typically. I mean, unless a few exceptions, but I'm speaking in general terms. But I was in a conversation a few weeks ago with a branding expert, and she said, you need to double down on intimacy for who you're working with. And what she made me realize, and you know how people say, oh, that's just business. It's nothing personal. It's just business. She made me realize that what I do is personal. It's not just business. It's personal, because if I'm talking to a business owner, that who that you're talking about, if their name is on the side of the building, the people that get hired and they're retained are a reflection of their name, their legacy, and their standards. And if you are a big employer in a small town and your name's on the side of the building and someone goes in and they have a bad experience with someone who was hired in haste, the customer doesn't say, I had a bad experience with Jane Doe who was incompetent or unwilling to help. They say, this company sucks.
Yeah.
So
You know
now that's way more personal and to
what
who.
Yes, and what you're making me think about is, people often make a distinction between B2B and B2C. Well, even B2B, business to business, is still to a person,
It is.
right? Right. So one of the things you want to do as you're talking to prospective clients and existing clients, for that matter, is you're not just talking about the impact of what you do on the organization. You're talking about the impact on what you do to them, which might be they're related, but it also could be different, right? So, for instance, if you're talking to a CEO of a company, especially if they have a board of directors, yeah, they care about the company and how the company's performing and all that. But they may be under a lot of pressure from their board of directors, right? There may be some personal pain or problem they also need to solve. So, yeah, think in terms of not just the benefit to the organization, but also the benefit to the person. Even if it's a B2B environment, it's still also a B2C conversation, if you will. So
That's what I was taking from your when you started talking about who, that's to me, that's there's one level of, hey, we provide these benefits that could be of value. But when you go to that deeper level of the who that you were talking about, who specifically and what's in it for them and what meaning are they going to associate with your proposition? To me, that's the difference between just regular relevance and radical relevance. And I think you did a great job pointing that out. Thank you.
yeah, great. You bet.
So what you talked a little bit about strategic and tactical. What are some of the components of strategic relevance and what advice do you have for people that are trying to best utilize them?
Yeah, so the first one would be the who. It's the big questions, the big strategies, the big decisions. Who are we trying to reach? For whom do we do our best service, or who do we enjoy working with the most? And then mixed in with that, of course, then goes target market, right? What is our target market? One thing about radical relevance, or what I teach in radical relevance, is generally speaking, and there can be some exceptions, but generally speaking, the narrower the better, because the narrower you go in terms of the who and the market, the, the more relevant your how you talk about your value is going to be to them, and the more they're going to see them. So here's the key. All right. Sometimes when I deliver my presentations, I'll hold up a mirror to the audience. I travel with these little mirrors, and I go, "This is what you want. When you talk about your value, whether it's on a website or a LinkedIn profile or an email message, or you're standing in front of a group, you want them to see themselves in the message. Can they see themselves? Can they relate to what you're saying? It could be what you're saying, it could be the questions you ask. That's another way we demonstrate knowledge and empathy of their situation, through the questions we ask. I was having a conversation with a sales manager, this is years ago. I asked him a question. He said, were you listening in on our meeting this morning? And so what that means is I asked a question that showed a knowingness of his world. And so the narrower you go and the deeper we get to know these people, that informs the kinds of questions and more insightful questions we can ask that a generalist, someone else who hasn't taken that time and energy, wouldn't be able to ask. And so now they see themselves in what you're doing. That whole empathy is just an appreciation and an understanding of their world is critical. So that's a big part. There's the who, there's the target market that's part of that. Then another part of that is the differentiator. What are our differentiators going to be? Now, usually the who comes first on that. The why can be, it's an intermix, it's interplay. But we need to know that. We need to know what are going to be our main differentiators that do make a difference to folks. And so then after that, then we have the tactical relevance. So the book is divided into two big sections, strategic relevance and tactical relevance. Now the tactical is the implementation of those things.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the foundations of tactical relevance?
Yeah. So, all right. So when you decide on the target market, then, all right, what is the market? How are we going to reach that market? Are there associations? Are there other, who are the other people trying to sell that market we might partner with? What's our message going to be based on the fact that it's now we're starting to craft a message. We have what I call a value positioning statement. That's tactical relevance, the value positioning statement, how we actually articulate the differentiators, how we articulate the fact we're focusing on them. That's part of that. I have a little differentiation formula from a couple of formulas in the book, a little exercise to think about how am I going to talk about what makes me different. And so that's part of the tactical relevance.
What about
So
research? What role does research play in?
research is huge. Radical relevance is not for the lazy person. Okay. Now here's the neat thing with AI now. And when I wrote Radical Relevance, AI was just kind of coming onto the scene. Now I use it all the time to help me with the research. And so I use research in two ways. At least, well, three ways actually. Sorry. I research the industry Because if I'm going to be talking to someone in an industry, I want to know, especially if I'm doing work in different industries, I want to know some of the things that are going on in an industry. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the opportunities? I also want to research the individual. And AI can just anything that's public knowledge, public, domain, it will find. And you can find some neat things. I will also use AI to research who my clients know who they might introduce me to so then I can be relevant through an introduction. So those are three main ways I use it. Now, here's one caveat or important thing to keep in mind when you're using AI or really any kind of research. Don't assume that what you think you've learned about the industry or that person or their company is true. So I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of financial advisors. Financial advisors try to build relationships with accountants, attorneys. So I teach them learn about the world of accounting, not just the firm, but just the general. And then they can go and they can say to an accountant, it's my understanding that a lot of accounting firms are not just looking for good, ideal fit clients, but you're also having challenge finding good talent, people who want to sit for their CPA and all that. Is that true for you? And just asking that question shows a knowledge of the industry that someone else who didn't take the time to do that might not be able to ask. Now they may say, "Well, actually, no, we're pretty good in that department," or they may say, "Yeah, it's true. You know a little bit about our world, right?" So I never assume what I learned is true, but I use it to ask questions that demonstrates a knowingness, but allows them to contribute to the conversation at the same time.
And you talked about when you talk about research, I think there's a lot of folks make a mistake, and I'm guilty of it. When I say a lot of folks, I'm including myself in this by making assumptions in the past, like, oh, I know about that, or oh, I wouldn't like that if I were them, and the bias towards our own preferences. And I have to remind myself on a regular basis, while I may not like that, or I may not appreciate that, or I may not that value that, they're not me. And there's a whole bunch of people that I my parents grew up country music. I'm not a country music fan. I like rock. And, if someone's trying to market country music to me, it's not going to work. But there's millions of people that love it. So instead of just making assumptions based on our personal preferences, like, oh, I've been talking to these people, or I've been interacting with this, and I feel this way, or I think this, I love that you're in the spirit of radical relevance. You're saying, hey, go beyond that. It's great that you're talking to people and you're in the market and you got your finger on the pulse of what's going on, but go out and do your research anyway, because it's necessary. And the margin for error, I think now is less than it's ever been, because if it's not, and I love your title, Radical Relevance. If you're not doing something above and beyond, you're going to get ignored, period.
That's right. And nobody likes to be ignored, right?
Nobody like,
So,
speaking of which, I know we're at the kind of point where people are probably thinking, wow, I love what Bill's saying, what Bill Cates is saying. Notice not the G, what Bill Cates is saying. And I want to know more about him or his books. Obviously we've talked about radical relevance. What are the best ways for them to connect with you, or if they find out more about you? I know you do speaking engagements, you do consulting,
yep.
you got books
Yep.
out. What's the best way?
Yeah. So here's the book, Radical Relevance. Thank you for plugging that. Really, if you go to billcates.com, BILLCATES.com, that'll take you into my world. Also, look me up on LinkedIn, link up. Let's have a conversation. You have questions. That's great. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. And if you want to learn about the book specifically, if you go to radicalrelevancebook.com, you can learn more about that. There's a fun little video there that kind of entertaining, get you know a little bit about the book. So yeah, would love to chat with you. And any friend of Mason's a friend of mine.
So, you hit on something with the content. Like, hey, I'm easier to interact with. I got content. I know that a lot of people do what you call random acts of content. What are they doing wrong, and what kind of advice do you have on your checklist that listeners could apply even as soon as today?
Yeah. So what I mean by random acts of content is just, developing content, as we know, is important. It's part of our body of evidence to build credibility. Now, content can be videos, which is, pretty important these days. Could be blogs, a little less important, but still valuable. Could be guides, could be reports. There's lots of ways to develop content, and that's building a part of the body of evidence that we need. But we want to be strategic around this. And we want to make sure that there's, first of all of our content that we produce should have a very clear call to action. In marketing, they often call it a CTA, call to action. What do you want someone to do as a result of just consuming your content? And so make sure you're very clear on that, and don't assume they're going to know what to do. Tell them, or gently tell them or ask them to take the next step. That's very important on that. Make sure you're developing content that's relevant to who you're trying to reach. Now, here's a challenge that some people face, and I'm going through this with one of my coaching clients right now. Sometimes when you make a decision to go after a specific target market that might be a little different than who you're serving now, or a subset of who you're serving now, a lot of people are afraid to do that. First of all, because they're afraid they're going to lose their current clients. That, does that mean I stop serving these people, or am I going to miss other opportunity? Not necessarily. So let your clients know that if you're deciding to go after a certain type of market, let them know. Let me give you a specific example. One of my coaching clients, financial advisor, uh, deals with a lot of wealthy, high net worth types of individuals, but one of his target markets is physicians. Now, this is talking about radical relevance, very targeted. Physicians who are about to or just sold their practice, their medical practice, to a venture capital firm or to a larger entity. Now they become employees. That's a very narrow market, but all the content he's developing now, and even his website and LinkedIn profile with my help, are starting to change a little bit to reflect this, right? So that's very intentional content creation. And he's also letting his current clients know this so they don't see it and think, what am I, chopped liver here? Am I not, is he not going to work with me anymore? So being very clear and intention with the content you create and the direction you take and how you communicate that, and not leaving it to chance and surprises, unpleasant surprises.
It's interesting you say that because as we talk about this thing, I look back on some of my assumptions in the past and how it's turned up to bite me because I made assumptions like, oh, well, it's obvious, or oh, how could they not figure this out?
No.
And you talked earlier about the reticular activating system and our minds being overwhelmed with so much stuff. And we're actively going through life thinking, what can I ignore? What do I not have to pay attention to so I can focus on what is important? And if you're just assuming they're going to figure this out, they're not looking for extra stuff to notice. It's so focused on what is exactly do I need to pay attention to? And
Yeah.
if you're not
Here are
spelling it out, you're not going to generate action.
here are a couple killers of good marketing message. One is you just touched on, which is assuming they're going to understand the concept, assuming they're going to understand a word. Here's a marketing message I talk about in the book, and it's critical. We always want to talk about what we do, how we do it, why, all of that in concepts and words and phrases that are already in the brain of the receiver of that message. Very important, because if it's not already there, you're going to make them think too much. The brain doesn't want to do that.
100%.
Don Miller with StoryBrand calls it cognitive overload or cognitive load. And so we've got to be now, if you want to introduce a new term, if you want to be a little clever, okay, just make sure you define it right away. So you're not making them guess, what do you mean by that? Which brings in the next killer of our message, and killer of clarity, which is the key here. The brain craves clarity because it doesn't want to work hard. And so we've got to be careful that cleverness and creativity don't get in the way of clarity. So if you're looking at messages, you're looking at verbiage, oh, that's pretty clever. Even ChatGPT comes up with some pretty clever stuff these days. I never would have thought of that. And sometimes it's quite usable, but sometimes it can actually get in the way of the clarity. So always err on the side of a little less clever, I'm nothing wrong with cleverness and creativity. I'm all for it, but not if it hurts the clarity of what we're trying to create here.
That's so true. I'm having this conversation and I'm thinking about how I go through life and how I'm getting to the point now where if I am in front of a potential business transaction, if it can't be explained to me quickly and easily, it repels me.
Yep, that's it.
I expect whoever's presenting something to me, to understand my issues, my challenges, and to have the solutions ready to go and to be able to explain them to me very quickly, very concisely to the point that it can make sense and I want to take action. If it doesn't do that, then I'm like, they're not prepared to deal with me yet.
Yeah,
And
the
I
way
ignore
to
them.
earn the way to earn the rights to someone's attention is to show that you know a little something about them. And I may not fully understand your problems, challenges. I might have a sense, and then I'm going to check in with you to see if that's true for you because it's true for other people in your industry or whatever. But if when people reach out to me, and just like everybody listening, we get that every day. We get it on LinkedIn, we get it on emails. Uh, they try to make it look like they know us, but you can usually see through it pretty quickly. People in your industry, people, they say something that hints at it, but we see through that now. But if someone actually has listened to one of my podcasts or read one of my blogs or my books or actually went on my website and said, I really like what you said about this on your website. I'll do that all the time when I'm reaching out to folks. I'll look at their LinkedIn profile and sometimes I have a fun little saying or something. There's one gal, a prospect of mine that I was introduced to, and I went to her LinkedIn profile and she talks about what she does. And at the very end, she said, and world domination. Right? So immediately in my email to her, I said, I love your phrase, world domination, right? Smiley face or whatever. So if we demonstrate some knowingness, some attempt to get to know them at least a little, then now we're earning the right to a little bit of their time. And the deeper we've gone, usually the more we've earned the right because now we can start asking questions that I see that you said this, or I see that, this seems to be one of your emphasis in your business. I saw on your website, or you just had this merger or this or whatever, right? The deeper you go, the better questions you can ask and then get them to reflect on those. And you have a meaningful conversation rather than something that's just stays at the surface and doesn't go anywhere.
I'm thinking about the science of that
Mm.
because you're dead on. Because I mean, I'm
Let's
sitting there
say
thinking,
right on instead of dead on. All right.
well, I'm sitting there thinking about though that if someone comes up to me, my plate is full.
Yeah.
My dance card is full. So
It's
for me to
always
do
full.
something new, I have to not do something that I'm already doing or committed to make time and space for something else. And if someone comes up to me and they're like, "Hey, I've got this or this or this," and they haven't done their homework and they don't understand, then they haven't put enough skin in the game. Their time with me, they haven't put enough skin in the game yet. It's like
They
the
haven't
risk
earned
is
the
on my
right to
part.
your attention. That's right.
Right. That's exactly right. But if someone comes up to me and they've done the homework and they know something about me or what I'm trying to do, and then they come up to me and they've earned the right to my attention, then all of a sudden at this point, like if they have done their homework, they wouldn't want to waste their time with me because they would have already found out this isn't a fit. So if they've done their homework and they still want to spend time with me, okay, I'm willing to listen. And that's a
Right.
fair trade off for me because
Yep.
they have proven that I know they don't want to waste their time. And if they've
Well, and then they're able to ask a question that might get you thinking in a way you haven't thought before. And, one of the ways to bring value quickly to someone is to ask them a question that gets them thinking.
absolutely.
Yeah. And the only way to do that is to do a little research on the industry, on the company, on the person, whatever's relevant.
Talk to me a little bit. I know that you're a big fan of social proof, but what advice do you have? And as am I, but what advice do you have to people who may be kind of new in their industry or they've got a new business and they don't have a bunch of social proof yet? What advice would you have to people like that to help them, their business overcome that obstacle if they don't have much, but you know it's necessary?
Well, there's a difference between having much and having nothing. So whatever you have, use it. And what I mean by that is so for instance, I'm right now in the middle of developing just a website page for a program that I'm going to deliver to the banking industry. And I've done some work with banks, not a lot. I've done with, but I've done some. And so I'm reaching out to everyone I've done some work with. And a couple of cases, it's a little older relationship and saying, I would love to include a statement. I would love to include what a business partner of mine used to call testimonial on my website. And so you get whatever you can. And now here's the thing, testimonials are kind of a cousin to referrals because it's showing, it's creating the benefit and if it's someone who's like them, like if you're reaching out to CEOs and you have testimonials from CEOs, or if I'm reaching out to banking and it's from a banker, right? So the more relevant, the better. But I've also used testimonials from different industries. Sometimes that's okay to borrow until you can get what you can get. Now, here's a couple important things around social proof. First of all, make sure whatever social proofs, like, so some folks like to say, we worked for Microsoft, we work for Apple, we work for this, we work for, right? They focus on small business. They're reaching to me, a small business owner, and they're talking about they're name dropping. I'm sorry, but that is not relevant to me. In fact, all it does is say, well, I'm too small for you, right? So make sure whatever name dropping you do, whatever logos you put of your clients on your website or whatever, make sure it's related to the market that you're trying to go after. Otherwise, you're going to actually lose people. You're going to repel them. So that's one thing. Make this social proof testimonials as real as you possibly can. So, for instance, AG Green Dallas. Is there really an AG Green Dallas? There's no picture. It's just a statement, right? So I use full name. I use company name whenever possible. I use their location. I have photographs of the people. I have almost no testimonials anymore that don't have, at least have the photograph of the person giving me the testimonial. And I've done a lot of video testimonials lately. Huge. This is what can tip the scales. And just think about yourself as a consumer. When you go to Amazon, you're looking for a product, you look at the reviews. Sometimes you look at what people have written, right? This social proof is huge. References, asking for references. I always make sure that I have some nurtured references. So if somebody asks me for references, then I have someone a couple of folks I can introduce them to. They don't always call the references, but they want to know that I have them. So just make them as real as possible. One real quick little tactical thing around video testimonials. I've got a whole page, by the way. If those who are listening want to go, if you just go to advisorsrave.com, advisors, because the big niche is financial advisors for me. So advisorsrave.com, you will see a bunch of video testimonials that I've received. And I've got them segmented into experienced and successful and a little newer in the industry and managers. But here's a tip I learned a long time ago. Not everyone's going to watch all those videos, right? They might watch one or two. So I've got little call outs, little excerpts from each video right next to the video link itself. So even if they don't watch every video, they can glance and look at some of the things that people said. So we make it easy to consume the social proof. So you want the social proof easy to consume.
Nice. It was one thing that just popped into my head random thinking, listening to what you're saying is if anybody's watching or listening and they don't have any, just like you said earlier, you have some or none or any, but if someone doesn't have any, my immediate feedback just off the top of my head is better than money back guarantees. I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Reversing the risk, they call that, and absolutely, I always offer full money back guarantees. Here's a little trick around money back guarantees, by the way, and you have to decide if it applies to your business. But here's what I learned: the longer the time frame you give someone to make the decision and to return whatever it is, the less likely they're going to do it. If you give someone a 30-day guarantee or a 15-day guarantee, man, they're going to be watching the calendar. When I get a 30-day guarantee of some membership site or something like that, I got a reminder at day 28 or 29, do I want to renew? But if I have lots of time, it starts to just float out of the awareness and you'll get very, very few. Now, if people are unhappy, you want to return their money, of
of
course. But
course.
so that's just a little trick or, I shouldn't call it a trick. It's a strategy. You'll still honor it.
Sure.
You just make it, give them more time and they're less likely to do it.
So in the spirit, you said trick, that just triggered another whole nother thought for me.
Yeah.
The cousin of trick is gimmick. What tips do you have for creating urgency without it sounding gimmicky or pushy?
Yeah. Oh, one of our biggest challenges in business development is inertia. Right. People are either stuck doing what they're doing, moving in a certain direction, or doing nothing in some cases. So the last chapter of Radical Relevance is a model that I learned from a venture capitalist in New England, a gentleman by the name of Michael Scott. And just in a nutshell, the model goes like this. You want to make sure you as best you can, you position your business in a way that you are solving blatant critical problems, meaning the prospect knows they have the problem and it's not aspirational. I'll get to it someday. It's critical. They're bleeding money. There's a huge emotional cost of not making a goal. There's a tax deadline, right? It's critical. It's got to get it. And people will move heaven and earth to solve a critical problem, but they may never work to solve an aspirational problem or take advantage of an aspiration. Now, if there's a lot of emotion behind the aspiration, something they want to achieve, then that's okay if you can tap into that emotion. So that's a framework. So here's the deal. If you've got someone who's not moving forward in a decision to work with you, one of the things you can do, and you have to be very careful about this because we're not trying to manipulate, we're just trying to be genuinely educational. So I would say to you, Mason, look, clearly to solve this problem or to take advantage of this opportunity, there's an investment, right? We've talked through that. There is an investment. There's also a cost to doing nothing. There's a cost to staying where you are. Can we think through that just a little bit? Right?
100%.
And so without trying to manipulate, without saying, well, if you don't do this, you're going to do this. No, let's just talk about it. We've talked about the investment in moving forward. Let's talk about the cost of staying where you are. They may decide, okay, I'm happy. I can bear that cost. I will stay where I am. But that's usually what will take an aspirational situation to a more critical situation if they don't want to bear that cost of staying where they are. And if they're happy to bear the cost of where they're staying are, well, maybe you move on or maybe you find ways to stay in touch until things change. And it's often it is a timing issue. The problem, the pain gets high enough that then now they do want to take advantage. But you can't force anybody. They've got to want it bad enough. So there you go.
I think business people often struggle to find ways to stay useful to clients when there's no
Mm.
immediate
Mhm.
problems to solve. There's not none of those major problems that you're talking about. Maybe they've done a great job for somebody and things are going well, status quo, whatever, even keel. What should leaders share, send, or do to maintain top of the mind awareness without resorting to newsletters, promotions, or those checking in emails that they're so notorious for sending out?
Well, I wouldn't discount newsletters, first of all, and by the way, I think posting on LinkedIn is probably fool's gold, but I have a LinkedIn newsletter which has probably about 6,000 subscribers now that gets delivered into the inbox. So rather than I mean, I do post, but posting is hit or miss whether anyone's going to see it or not. But if I create a message on my newsletter, it goes straight in. So I wouldn't discount that.
You know what?
Um, I'll,
I'm gonna piggyback on that.
yeah,
Our mutual friend Shep Hyken,
yeah.
who was on my show probably 8 or 9 months ago,
Hmm.
he encouraged me to do the same. And my knee jerk reaction was, I love Shep, and he's never led me wrong. But he's like, Mason, you need to do a new email newsletter on LinkedIn. And I started thinking, because I assumed newsletter by definition was, oh, I've got to put together a whole bunch of articles. I'm like, I don't have time for that. Newsletter on LinkedIn is one article. Like it's one article. Like if you found a way to do it more, but I found that it's one article and I send mine out every 2 weeks. Some people do it weekly, some do it monthly. But my idea when Shep told me this is like, oh man, I don't have time to put together a newsletter, but it's more like an article that goes out to those folks. And once I
Yeah,
realized
it's
that
an article. Yeah,
it,
it's
it
usually an article. I mean, there's there's different ways to do it. Some make them like with all kinds of topics and links. Yeah, what I
what you're
do
saying is
is
right though. I'm agreeing with you and I'm thinking, but just to our earlier conversation, you said, hey, if you've got a new definition or something, you need to spell it out. You don't need to assume. And when I heard Shep tell me newsletter, I thought, oh, this is going to be a big, long production. No, it's an article I write, copy, paste, put in there. And it's one insight that I learned from something that I stumbled across and usually within the previous week or two. So it's all relevant and up to date. He was totally right. And the statistics on it have been very pleasant surprise. So I commend you on pointing out the LinkedIn newsletter feature. That's something I would not have
yeah.
touched on.
So what we do is we do a newsletter once a week, and then to our regular newsletter list, and that's a list we own, we control. LinkedIn newsletter, you don't control that. somebody over there could wake up tomorrow and say, we're stopping it. So we can't rely just on that. We got to have our own list. That's important asset for our company. And what I'll do is my team member who helps me format everything, she'll save it as a draft in LinkedIn, and then usually the following week I'll then release it to my LinkedIn subscribers. And so it's the same newsletter. And what's also neat around LinkedIn newsletters is you can put links in there to events and to products and to whatever you want. They frown on links in posts, but links in newsletters are fine. Real quick, I know we're getting close to time here. Case studies. One great way to stay in touch with not just clients, but also influencers, people who may not be clients, but they're influencers for you. Once a quarter, put together a case study of someone you helped, someone you served. What was their situation? What was their problem? How did they feel about it? What solution did you put in place? What was the result? And now how do they feel about it? And just work those up, 4 times a year. It's a great way to bring your value to life in a very real, tangible way. You don't make them long. They're quick. One page, it takes a minute or two or three to go through. But that's a great way to stay in touch is the real life implementation of the work that you do, as opposed to just kind of on the surface talking about what you do.
Bill, I'm so thankful for your time today and the ideas you've shared, and you've dropped a lot of gems. Not just, I think that people are listening and watching today are not going to walk away with one idea or two ideas they can actually apply. I think there's a whole bunch of things that they can apply, and holistically absorbing everything you said. I have different filters for how I look at things now as a result of this conversation. I really appreciate it, and I hope that those watching and listening feel the same way.
You
If you
bet.
could only give a listener one piece of advice, we've talked about a lot. What is the most important single piece of advice that you would give to someone watching or listening today based on your experience and knowledge?
Yeah, I guess it would have to be kind of a summarization of what we've talked about, which is narrow your focus on who you're trying to serve. Beware of the mistake of trying to widen the net and rather make it a smaller net. Because what happens if when you start to think about your messaging and you're creating a casting this net to try to attract people, and you don't want to leave out these folks, and you don't want to leave out these folks, and you don't want to leave out all of a sudden your net gets so big, what you say is diluted. And so if you're going to have more than one target market or more than one persona, have different messages to go to those different people. Don't try to do it under one umbrella because it'll be weak and it won't be compelling. And if it's irrelevant, it'll be ignored. If it's not compelling, they'll forget about you and you're dead in the water.
So, as a reminder, I know about it earlier, but if we've had some new people joining us since we started our conversation, if people want to learn more about you, your organization, the work you do, can you repeat what are the best ways for them to connect with you?
Yeah. BillCates.com. Look up Bill Cates on LinkedIn, radicalrelevancebook.com. I also did a TED Talk, if I can just plug that, thank you. Just did a TED Talk, would love folks to go watch it on money and money mindset. It's a whole different thing. Uh, yeah, there you got my book, The Hidden Heist, thehiddenheist.com. It's a fun parable book around money. And if you just look up Bill Cates, TEDx, Bill Cates, you'll find my TEDx talk. We just went over 100,000. I think it's 100,000 and 522, but who's counting?
Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's been a pleasure having you. Let's do this again
Likewise.
sometime soon.
Thank you.